Welcome to Clear Conversations, Entrepreneurial Legacies with your host, John Sleeting, an executive partner for Clearwater Capital Partners. Join John and his guests on this exclusive journey behind the scenes of extraordinary entrepreneurial families. In this series, we will dive deep into the stories of John's guests, who generously unveil the paths they've walked, the challenges they've overcome, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Throughout these conversations, we explore their achievements beyond mere recognition, disclosing the distinctive perspectives that have shaped their entrepreneurial journeys. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacies series. I'm John Sleeting, your host, and today I'm joined by Heather Larson, the founder and chief executive of LiveGive, a strategic philanthropy and executive coaching organization. Heather's focus and work with families, her work with organizations, corporate giving, working with women, with next-gen family members, and the totality of how to think about the subject of giving and generosity and stewardship very broadly in the creation of your legacy, not waiting to the end, but taking advantage of the day-to-day and the actions that you're demonstrating now is going to be an engaging conversation. You're going to be encouraged, inspired, and challenged to maybe take some next steps in your own philanthropy. So we will dive in, and Heather, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today in the studio and to talk about this concept of entrepreneurial legacies. I loved our discussions to date on the subject, so the opportunity to now capture this in this podcast form and share it with others, I hope is encouraging, inspiring, and challenging to them, because there's absolutely items that have come out of our discussions that have really been thought-provoking for me as well in the work that we do together in multiple ways. So thank you for taking the time to be here. There's really a couple different paths that I want to explore today with you. One is your own entrepreneurial journey, and the other is the people that you serve regarding the work that you do. So let's first start with your own entrepreneurial journey, which is now going on a 5-year anniversary. But before I share more, why don't you go ahead and share a little bit of background of the launch of LiveGive?
I am happy to do that, John. I'm excited to be here today and have so much respect for you and for the Clearwater Capital team, and it's fun to be part of this with you today. So my entrepreneurial journey did start almost 5 years ago. So January is going to be my 5-year anniversary of LiveGive, and that for me was birthed out of a season where I had stepped away from a job that I had been in for 20-some years, and I had a huge, great big whiteboard in front of me. And I would tell you that big open whiteboard is one of the best gifts that anyone could have in the midst of their career journey. Just to put all assumptions aside and to be able to talk with mentors, to be able to process with your family, to be able to pray about it, for me personally, bringing my faith into it, and just to say, God, what is it that you want me to do in this season ahead? So looking at my great big whiteboard that had a whole lot of empty space, I had some strategic conversations with mentors who had built into me over the years. And one of the resounding things that came out of almost every conversation was, Heather, don't put on somebody else's suit. Don't feel like you have to take on somebody else's brand or somebody else's vision. Like, you've earned the right to build your own thing, and you don't have anything to prove. You've done big and complicated. Just go do what you most want to do. And coming out of that, it didn't actually take me long to determine what that was. You know, my journey of connecting philanthropy opportunities with people of great influence and desire and stewardship has gone back years. I mean, for me, it started when one of the leaders in our church went on a trip with this guy named Bono to be able to learn about the AIDS pandemic. And they came back and said, hey, we want to start this initiative around AIDS in Africa. And they basically collected $1 million and asked me to figure out how to steward that. And it started this journey for me of how do I find great opportunities and link people to those so that people can have impact by connecting with others who are doing amazing work. And I quickly knew that I wanted to continue doing that in the world of philanthropy advising.
And so you've already hit on several different things, right? What is philanthropy broadly, and how you think about that? And the term stewardship, and how all of that leads towards this concept of legacy and what is legacy. So we're actually going to go through a few of those different words in time. But LiveGive then focuses on two different areas: executive coaching, leadership development, working with other entrepreneurs in their own right, and the philanthropic consulting. And on the surface, some people might look at those and say that they're very different, but they're very intertwined, right? Because the other entrepreneurs that are out there are also thinking about, well, what is my legacy, and how does philanthropy and giving back fit into that? Yeah. So let's start with some definitions first. How do you define what is stewardship? How would you define what is legacy?
I would say legacy is making choices today about what matters most to me. So it's easy to think of legacy as just long term, but the reality is you and I are both living out our legacy right now. The choices that we are making today will turn into what we are known for and the imprints that we leave on people and on this world down the road. So for me, my passion is really helping people figure out if they want to create a legacy, what are the decisions that they need to make today to help to start to fulfill that.
And then stewardship. How do you define stewardship?
Yeah, we all have different opportunities and talents and resources that we have been blessed with. And I believe it is our responsibility to use those resources to the greatest capacity that we can to maximize those resources. And so stewardship is looking at, for me, from a faith-based standpoint, it's looking at, okay, here's everything that God's given me. How do I use that for the greatest impact and the greatest aspect of being able to influence and to be able to leave a legacy?
I was invited to speak a few weeks ago to the DuPage County Bar Association. Yeah. DuPage County, for those across the country, is a collar county to Chicago and Cook County here in Illinois, very wealthy western suburbs. So all of the estate planning attorneys in that community are very busy often. And I spoke on philanthropic strategies. And so part of it is where the heart and the head intersect, and how you think about these things very deeply and strategically and intentionally for the purpose of being a voluntary philanthropist. Meaning an involuntary philanthropist is one that just pays taxes and let the governments decide where it's best allocated, which I don't believe is good capital allocation, and nor do I believe that's good giving, right? When you have a choice to redirect both income and estate taxes towards strategic philanthropy and the focus that you have. And then the heart, what are people passionate about? What is their responsibility? How do they think about that for their family or those charities? Because the only third bucket is taxes, right? So it's their family, it's charities, organizations important to them, and then the tax piece of it. So when you started looking at LiveGive and launching that on your journey, you started filling in the whiteboard and saying LiveGive is an organization, but it really does have these two focus areas, right? The coaching. How did that evolve in those early days? How did you go from whiteboard to concept to now these two different areas of focus?
So in the beginning, my focus was 100% on philanthropy advising, and coming out of a number of families saying to me, hey, who's going to help us figure out how we're going to do our giving at this point on? Because I'd been doing that a lot through my previous roles. And I went to school on learning about this field. So what's interesting is philanthropy advising is actually a very young field. There is a firm in downtown Chicago that claims they're the first privately held philanthropy advisory firm, and that was like 25 years ago. So when you think from an industry standpoint, it is pretty young. Yeah. And there are a lot of people who don't even realize that they can get help in this way. But for me, it was launching into, okay, I know people who really want to make a difference I know people who are pouring their energy around strategy and leadership into making their money to come alongside of them and help bring strategy and leadership into how they're giving away their money is where that synergy connects in that way. So it's basically a strategic planning process to be able to help a family or a corporation figure out what are they passionate about, what is the legacy that they want to leave, what are the values that they have, and then helping create a giving portfolio for them that I then help to manage for them over time.
And so that's the strategic philanthropy. That was the start of LiveGive. Then over time, you were pulled and asked more and more in terms of the executive coaching. Not only what are you doing over here with philanthropy, but what are you doing in the business? How are you approaching your businesses? How are you thinking about the executive role you have in the for-profit component versus the not-for-profit component? How did that emerge?
So, John, that's the part of the whiteboard that some of the whiteboard we fill out ourselves and some of the whiteboard other people fill out for us, or, God has orchestrated in that way. So I set off strictly on the philanthropy advising side, but had a number of CEOs or people that I had known over time that started asking me to come in and help with coaching CEOs and boards. So some about difficult succession processes, or some about a challenge that they were facing, or a CEO that was getting ready to make a big sale on a company and wanted some help together with his wife on how they look at their priorities overall with that, and really saying, we want a thought partner to come enter into something that is hard and messy to process through it. And at first, I was hesitant to engage in those ways, and I thought, I'll just do this a little bit on the side. And it's now 50% of my clients and of the work that I do. And there's quite a bit of overlap between my philanthropy advising clients and the coaching that I do with CEOs and boards.
Yeah.
There was one conversation that was really helpful for me with a guy named Fred Smith. He's the guy who started the gathering, and I have just tried to be a sponge of learning from as many possible people as I can in building out LiveGive. And it was a conversation with Fred Smith, and I said, Fred, I have to tell you, I love how the philanthropy advising side is growing out. I feel good about the progress, but I've got this other thing that and I feel compelled to help, and I want to jump in, and I don't want to say no, and I don't feel like I should say no. And I said, but I thought I should choose. My original business plan was just philanthropy advising. And Fred said, Heather, don't you dare choose. God has given you experience and expertise and passion and heart around both of those areas. They are both about being a thought partner with high capacity individuals and families. So lean into both. And I got to tell you, John, they are both really fun. It feels like a playground to me.
Well, and we are the beneficiaries of you doing both, right? Because it occurred to me actually recently in preparation for coming into today, which is where we started out, right? There was, just given our broad networks and the overlaps that existed and connections with people that we were serving and you were being introduced to and how that worked, we hit the pause button and said, okay, Heather, why not work with the Clearwater Capital Foundation team that a lot of our team is actually volunteering their time above and beyond their day jobs to engage in the work that we do in the foundation. But we knew that we needed more of a strategic plan. Where is our focus? We were committed to doing it. We were committed to serving the community and the world more broadly than only our clients, right? And I don't mean that. I mean, we take our day job very seriously and the people that we serve, but there's a lot of need and responsibility that we felt in giving back to people that would never be, clients of Clearwater Capital. And so you came in to work with our team in building out a strategic plan for the Clearwater Capital Foundation. And the team loved you, and the engagement and the clarity that you brought and the focus that you brought, that to this day, our team continues to point back towards, use as the filters regarding how they approach the grants that are made to make sure that they're reflective of the values of the organization, and making the greatest impact, and how we've been able to do that and doing that creatively too. And then the leadership of the firm and the partners came back and were so impressed with the work that you did, is you became a member of the board of Clearwater Capital Partners too. So even in our case, we went from starting on the strategic philanthropy and how we're approaching the Clearwater Capital Foundation, and we evolved then into the Clearwater Capital Partners board and how we're actually building the organization and what additional businesses we're adding and capabilities we're adding to best serve clients. And we all know that strategic philanthropy, I shouldn't say we all know, right? Strategic philanthropy is one of the 10 service standards defined for multifamily offices coming out of the Family Wealth Alliance. So it's a big part of the work then and the dialogue that we have back with clients and how we think about that. So even in our own case, it's both and. So I'm grateful for Fred's coaching and encouragement to you that it's continue to be both. As you work with families then, and you work with, and you said you've got some businesses in the mix, and some of those are family businesses that you're involved with. Some of them are corporate foundations that you're involved with, so there's a little bit of a difference. I first want to step back to your own entrepreneurial journey and say, what have you learned over the first 5 years about entrepreneurs, from yourself and your own experience, but also those people that you're serving?
Yeah. One of the best pieces of advice I got in the very early days was pay attention to the 80% rule and the idea of you move at 80. And, you move at 80% and the rest you'll figure out along the way. Like if you wait till you get to 100%, like you're going to be beyond what you need to be doing. And I have functioned out of that mindset based on those words of advice that I received. And each step of the way, so when I was building out the philanthropy advising side, I met with every philanthropy advisor I could get time with and learning from their business models and learning from their experience and leaning into that to figure out that model. But then when I realized, okay, I am going to be serious about the coaching of CEOs and boards, well, then I went to school on that. And I met with every high capacity executive coach that I could get time with. And, from my networks from Kellogg and from my previous work experience and anybody who would open the door to me who was coaching high level CEOs, I just got time with them and built out my model. And for me, spending time learning in those, of kind of constantly having a posture of learning, of I know I have experience that I bring to it. I'm confident in my own experience, but I always want to be learning from other people's experience as well too. So how to always be learning and then move at 80%.
Right. When it's the formal education that through Kellogg, right, in your academic pursuits. It's the informal education, which is the dialogue with individuals. And then it's the aspect of learning as you go. I still, to this day, on a confidential basis, take great ideas from the people that I serve, because I serve fantastic individuals and families that are really smart in what they're doing. So to be able to add value back to them and then also take their best ideas and turn around to my own family and say, hey, we should think about this. We should try this. Is just great learning, right? It's both formal and the informal learning that takes place. I think Craig Rochelle has a little acronym of, it's good enough to move on, GETMO, right? It's good enough to move on. And that's getting the 80% and then figuring out the 20% as you go. Has it been easy? Has it been the challenges that come into place? What are some of those early on obstacles that maybe even surprised you that were more difficult than you would have anticipated?
I would say it's understanding the pacing. So I was excited to build my own thing, to drive my own thing. I'd had a boss my entire working life, and suddenly I didn't have a boss. I'm my own boss. But the negative side of that is, how hard do I want to push myself? What do I want that to look like? And trying to figure out my own rhythms that are good in the midst of that, and what's the rate of growth that shows that I am maximizing what I've been given and my experiences and these opportunities in front of me. So I want to be stewarding what I have And I also want to grow at a sustainable pace. So juggling that when I'm the one doing all the pushing, because I do push hard. And I've actually really enjoyed that challenge. And I would say on the positive side, I have a better quality of life in these 5 years than I've ever had because of constantly trying to juggle that. So even just trying to figure out, okay, I know this is going on from a family standpoint. I can put things on hold, and I'm going to make up for it at 10 o'clock at night, and I'm happy to do that, and I can do that, and nobody cares.
Right. And
so,
you're doing it on your terms,
right,
and this is,
Right, exactly. So, but trying to figure out the pacing for myself and how quickly I want to grow has been a challenge. Another challenge for me has just been on the marketing side in that, really, John, you and I have laughed about this. I don't do any marketing. And for me, it has all been through networks and relationships and word of mouth, which anybody who is in an advising business will tell you. That's primarily how you're going to grow any of it. But it's been a challenge for me, almost like a guilt thing for me of, should I be doing more? Should I be pushing more in those ways? But then smart people tell me, no, just keep working the relationship, keep serving your clients, keep adding value, and the rest will scale from there. So those have been some of the things that have been interesting juggles for me trying to figure out, just in it being my own journey from an entrepreneurial side.
And there's no research on this. There's no science on this. This is the worlding according to John. But you end up hitting that 5-year mark, which is where you're at right now. And all of a sudden, there's a bit of a virtuous flywheel that starts picking up, right? I think in the early years, and whether it be a service or be a product, there's questions that are out there. Is this real? Is it sustainable? Is it, is the organization going to stand by it behind time? Are you here now, but you're going to go away and be doing something else in a year or two? Now that you're starting to hit that 5-year mark, is that what your experience is, and you're feeling that actually gain momentum into the future?
Yeah, definitely. You see that flywheel really starting to take off, and you see even the seeds that were planted along the way. I mean, there's some really great people over time who are like, that sounds like a really cool thing, and someday I'll think about doing that.
Right.
So one of my favorite stories is this wealth advisor that I had a conversation with early on, and I think he was just doing
before you met us, of course.
Yes, definitely.
Right?
Before, well, you'll laugh as the story plays out, but because he was super condescending with me, and he was kind, but it just condescending in the way of like, Heather, to be honest, like no one can make money doing that. Nobody wants to pay for help with their philanthropy. Like, I wish you the best, and it's not a field, basically, was his reaction. He's like, but I wish you the best, and it was good talking, and I hung up the phone. I remember exactly where I was. I was like, okay, well, I'll just keep on moving ahead. Well, several months later, I woke up one morning, I was like, I should look at LinkedIn today. I am horrible at LinkedIn. I don't spend a lot of time on any social media, and not LinkedIn. But I opened up my LinkedIn that morning, and he had just sent me a message, which, first of all, was indicative that he didn't even keep my phone number after we talked.
Right.
But he had been in a meeting with a group of executives with a publicly traded company, and they were super frustrated with the lack of movement in their foundation. And they were like, we just wish we knew somebody could help us. And suddenly I was his best friend. He's like, I know somebody. We connected that day. I was on retainer with that company within a couple weeks. And it was just helping me to understand, like, I just need to sow the seeds. Yeah. I just need to be working relationships, and things will multiply in time. And really just even seeing God's sovereignty in that of like, you know what? I am just so grateful, even just his prompting of check LinkedIn today. And how is, it's just, it really feels like I will do my part, and then I'll kind of release the results.
Well, and it's beyond the corporate, right? This were similar to our Clearwater Capital Foundation, right? That companies, the corporate foundation work is really important for companies to reflect their values back through what they're giving towards, right? And I do think from employee engagement, the teams looking at being part of something bigger than the company, right? The value and the service that they're bringing is being on mission, but also that being reflected through their giving.
Yeah.
But your work isn't just corporate. It's also with families directly, from family foundations, donor-advised funds, charitable trust. You're working with the individual families. How would you compare and contrast the work with a corporate foundation versus the work that you do with families?
Well, the corporate foundations, the fun part about that is you're helping them figure out what are the values of the company and what's the face of the company, which is usually something declared. I mean, you can go on their website and figure out what are the causes that would align with that company.
You would think it'd be easy.
I know.
On a first-hand basis, that's why we retained you to come in.
There are definitely challenges. And what's the scale and what's the scope? So, and who gets to determine that and which of the executives want to speak into it? So, being part of kind of sparring with the team of executives on helping to nail that down is actually a really fun process, but it's not necessarily personal for them. They're building out the company and kind of how the company is going to be remembered. On the flip side, to do that with a family, when you have multiple generations in the room, and especially when multiple generations all have different viewpoints of what they think legacy looks like and how they want to be investing their philanthropy dollars. It's very different when you're sparring between family members than with an executive team. And really, to be in conversations like that with a family, it almost feels sacred to how do you help find the alignment and the unifying values that pulls the whole family together, that helps the family feel like, yes, we are together using what we have been given to have blank impact. And watching a family come together in that way is, again, it feels sacred and it feels like a complete joy to me. I got done with one process with, it was primarily the husband and wife that were driving it, and their kids at that point weren't involved. And
how old were the kids at that point?
The kids actually were, in this family, the kids were teenagers.
Okay.
And they weren't interested, and it was kind of like the husband and wife wanted to figure it out first.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that the wife was kind of hesitant to be able to really speak into how the philanthropy was being given away, because she hadn't been the primary one earning the money, and she didn't feel like she should be the primary one giving it away. So we spent a lot of time talking about how do we help her develop giving muscles? How do we help her step into that role? And it's been more than once that at the end of those sessions, someone has said to me, okay, so should we pay you for marriage counseling at the same time that we're paying for the philanthropy?
Right.
But because it hits core issues of how families relate to each other, and sometimes you just need an outsider to come in and ask the questions and really help find the places of alignment.
Okay, so two paths, right? Because this is where I started out saying, your own journey, and we want to keep coming back to your own journey as an entrepreneur, and then the families you serve and the learning and going through the work that you do. So now you just brought up two topics in that example. One is next gen. How do you engage? How do you educate? How do you teach? How do you train? How do you bring up? How do you transfer the values beyond the valuables, right? Where people think about, well, the estate planning documents, the financial, right? You'll all take care of those sort of things. It's like, but if you're passing it on and stewardship is a value, then you also want them to be understanding and learning. So first we'll talk about how do you engage the next generation. But then second, I want to come back to women in wealth broadly, because literature states, more women are going to be controlling wealth than men over the next decade. And that's a topic we've got to talk about. But let's first talk about next gen. If it's not right as teenagers, when is the right time in terms of engaging in the philanthropy? But how do you think about that? Because you have two daughters that you've raised, college age, late teens, early 20s.
Yes.
So what is the right time, and how do you approach the next gen conversation?
Well, I have my personal bias in this, and then I'll just say it just plays out with different families. So I would say the right time with the next generation is as soon as they can start to get their heads wrapped around it. Dan and I had our girls involved in things that we were engaged with and partners on the other side of the world since they were itty bitty. They have been part of our giving and really how we wanted to help invest in others since they were very little. And it has shaped their character. It has shaped their worldview. I mean, both my girls had been to Africa twice by the time that they were 12.
So it's not just sending checks. Giving is not just sending checks and financially, but also diving in and being there, right? I mean, especially if the girls have been to Africa a couple times for what you were supporting over there. So what makes up good giving then, right? Is it being there fully present? Beyond just the financial support, and which one comes first? I mean, how do you unpack all of that?
Yeah, so I think it's really where it comes down to the family, and every family is unique. So when you look at what is going to be the right path for one family versus another, you've got some families who just maybe they have parents are on one faith journey and their kids have gotten older. Maybe the parents, their faith journey is new to them and they kind of want to figure things out first before they bring in their kids. Every family just has different dynamics of the pacing of how they want to engage their family and then what that looks like. For us, it was early and often. It was through giving. It was through firsthand experiences. I think especially for the younger generation, as much as they can have their hands-on experiences, mean far more than just writing a check. So if you can start with some hands-on experiences and then over time grow them into, okay, what would you like to give in this way? We had just gotten back actually from a trip that I took my daughter on, my oldest daughter, and she was just getting ready to celebrate her 16th birthday, and she had gotten back from Nicaragua, and when she was thinking about her birthday, she said, Mom and Dad, what I really want for my birthday is I want to do something for those kids in Nicaragua. And we worked with the organization and ended up buying a hand washing station that would go in a community. Okay, John, that was pre-COVID. Yeah. You think about how that hand washing station was used. And for my daughter to be able to go back and think about that all through COVID, that her 16th birthday was about a hand washing station for a community. It just started early, started often. I also realized that can't be possible with every family. So I try not to impose that on a family and start with where they are and where their kids are, and then we build it from there.
Yeah, and I'm sure I'm screwing up this Mark Twain quote, I think it is, that travel is the greatest antidote to bigotry and ignorance. Right? And so just being out there and seeing the world and understanding the world beyond yourself is where giving and stewardship of time, talent, and treasure of why write a check to an organization that just because it's a nonprofit and you get a tax deduction isn't good enough. You have to roll up your sleeves, dig in, understand, who is the leadership? Are they handling it well? What are they doing? Are they really, and is their mission and the work that they're doing really being fulfilled? For the money that is being received, right, and how you're supporting them too. Yeah. So from the next gen, because I agree, love them equally, treat them uniquely, because every child, even within a family, is very unique. But starting out early is the takeaway, and just having that as part of the family discussion over time, and over time bringing them more and more deeply into what that means, and maybe one of the kids is actually leading the family foundation, right? Is taking lead on the charitable giving, is acting as a trustee, but they're learning along the way of how you actually manage wealth. So let's now go over to women, because the subject of women is not next gen. We're talking about adult, educated, smart, intelligent, and yet there's a difference, at least in that one situation, but I think it goes way beyond that. There's a difference in how we think about this concept of women and wealth. What have been your observations, your learnings, your experiences on that subject?
So when I show up with a family or show up in a boardroom to be able to work with a corporate foundation, obviously I'm coming in from the standpoint of a woman who's wanting to help bring about kind of maximizing the impact that can happen through that family or through that foundation. And especially on the family side of it, even having questions right from the beginning of, okay, who's driving this? Like who around your family are the key decision makers? And I start with that question almost immediately, and everybody gets really uncomfortable. And then we're able to have real conversation around, is there somebody who really wants to say, you know what, for the family, I want to own this? And there are multiple families that I've worked with that through the process, the wife actually became the primary person driving it forward. I had one family that I worked with, and the wife was so frustrated because the husband just said yes to everybody. She's like, he says yes to anybody who asks for money. And I'm going to tighten the reins.
Right.
I want to follow a strategy.
For good giving, right? That's very generous, but at the same time,
Yes.
what makes good giving?
Yes, which in essence, he had driven it previously because he was so generous and he just wanted to say yes. But now she is the one initiating family meetings to have the conversations and to come back to their giving dream plan that we put together. But again, by defining roles and having conversation together, which sometimes is uncomfortable, but it forces good conversation to say, I'm sure it's the same way in your marriage it is with Dan and I. We have different things that each of us drive on, okay, I'll take this and I'll take this.
Right,
and
right.
you partner together to figure out all the different aspects of life that you navigate as a family. And for in the giving side, to be able to declare that together, and for me in the room, paying attention and asking, okay, so how does that sound to you, and how do you want to engage, and really listening to, you know what, I've just never felt like I knew how to do that. Okay, well, we are going to help you, and we're going to put the resources around you. And I really love the term of building someone's giving muscles because it really is. It's a discipline, and it's something that you learn over time. And it's one of the most rewarding things you can possibly do.
Well, and I think it's also very empowering in the same way it is with the next generation. It's something that the family can rally around. And when you look at the totality of a family's balance sheet, and maybe there's the alphabet soup of all the different trust structures that are there and tax treatments, but if you can develop those muscles on the philanthropic side and giving together and having the shared value conversation and understanding how do you evaluate the 990 of the charity that's receiving, and also how do you evaluate the financial statements and the tax return for yourself in managing what it is that you're managing, in order to develop so that there's a focus on the overall balance sheet. And in those situations where if it's manifesting itself in what the husband or the wife might be doing in the relationship or the lead that they're, and it's manifesting itself even in the charitable side of things, then it probably is also there on the entire balance sheet. And the life insurance companies will tell us, right? Statistically, the guys go first, right? That's the nature of it. So between that and between over the decades, professional women, professional entrepreneurial women, executive, this is where more women will be controlling wealth than men in the decades to come. Yeah. And if those muscles aren't developed and there's not that license for the engagement, that's a dangerous path, I think, for society overall. But also, how do you equip and empower over time and make sure that that's happening? There's actually one family that I serve, first had the lunch, it was a 4-hour lunch about 12 years ago now, and individual I was talking to a lot, but it happened to be me with the husband over lunch for 4 hours. And after he came back, and he said, you know what, we'd like to move forward, John, with you and Clearwater Capital. And I'm like, well, just so from learning, just out of professional curiosity, what was the difference? Because I know you're talking to a lot of people. And he said, you're the only one that asked me what my wife would think about all this stuff, right? And it's like, well, if no one else is asking that question, right? I mean, I think that's terribly unfortunate, because if we're serving families, you're not just serving one individual in the family, you're serving the family for generations to come in the way that they're thinking about all these sort of things.
Yes. I just have to say, John, I think that's one of the main reasons why I felt so much synergy with Clearwater Capital and watching you and the rest of the team and how you all engage with families. Because for me, one of the things that was important in my business model that multiple people said to me right from the beginning is don't ever touch the money. You don't want to touch the money and interfere with their wealth advisors and interfere with the financial side of what they're doing. You stay focused on the lane of where they give and what their giving looks like. And so, but that other side, it matters. So if I am trying to empower the whole family and I'm trying to help the whole family come together on the philanthropy side, but that's not happening with their overall portfolio, then obviously there's a misalignment in that way. And it is one of the many things that I really respect about you and about CCP.
Well, thank you. We love having you on the board. Actually, it's going to be one of my questions to you is for all the organizations you're involved with, and we asked and you chose to engage in our board. What is it about Clearwater Capital then that you look at and you want to be part of what we're building together?
It is exactly that of the financial acumen with the heart and passion to invest long-term in families. So that side of it, it's beyond my area of expertise, and yet to be able to help on the leadership side, the organizational side, and to be a sponge in understanding what is happening from the financial side and how much alignment that there is overall in the values. It was very clear to me in talking with you and John and the rest of the team of, this is a firm that I want to invest in and I want to be part of and I want to cheer on however I can.
Well, we love having you as part of our board and the organization and your 80-20 rule, right? We spend a lot of time on the 20. It's like we're still figuring this out and building because our clients, right, in the world, it continues to evolve and you have to have that flexibility in terms of how we adapt to meet the needs. Which also gets into what the client families that we're serving are doing, because you hit on it in terms of not touching the money, right? Focused on the giving side of it. When we look at institutional, if you were to look at it from an endowment theory perspective, and being out at Yale for the Endowment Institute years ago, right, there's this big focus on, a lot of people talk about investment policy in the middle, but then there should also be a giving policy that's coming out of that, but there's also a gift receipt policy, and this is true for institutional nonprofits as well as family foundations, donor-advised funds. What is the gift receipt policy? What is being gifted into the charitable entity that is being controlled, private foundation, donor-advised fund, et cetera, and then the giving coming out of that or the granting coming out of that that's going to the end charities. And so interfacing the philanthropy back with the money, right, in various forms and ownership and entities, that has to be well thought through regarding what is being gifted in order to minimize the tax, maximize the benefit, meet long-term objectives. Charitable remainder trusts, right? Given interest rate moves we haven't seen this level of interest rates for discounting in the last 15 to 20 years. And given that move actually makes charitable remainder trusts more attractive than they've been in that 15 to 20 years. So how does that interface for the cash flow coming back out in order to take out taxes, maximize cash flow, maximize the investments? So it all absolutely does dovetail together. But before I digress too far, right down that avenue, to come back then too, we talked about next gen, talked about women. Any other thoughts on those two subjects and moving forward and how you want to better serve families next as you even flex, adjust, pivot, whatever we want to call it, for the future of LiveGive?
There are so many families who just do their giving flippantly or based on existing relationships or based on where they feel duty to give. Like we are obligated because of blank, so this is where we write our checks to over time. And I just hope to keep working with more and more families who want to step back and actually spend time dreaming together. Like the ability to dream together as a family and talk about what you want to invest in and to bring together all the different viewpoints. There's a magic to that I think even unifies a family in ways that are deeper even than just their philanthropy. So when I think of engaging women, when I think of engaging next gen, it's about dreaming. One of my early clients, we finished the Giving Dream Plan, and she's like, "You're really like a dream maker for us." Like we had never actually taken the time to put this stuff down and to actually form a plan around it. And now we know. Like we now know what our dreams are on the giving side. And I just think that's the best way to engage. Of course, everybody in the family wants to be part of that.
There's once an attorney that said, maybe if I give a couple $1 million during my lifetime, that's great. But if I can help people give a couple hundreds of millions of dollars, right, in terms of things that they're passionate about, their dreams are focused on, what an opportunity to live, right, and make your work on a day-to-day basis, your mission, your ministry, as you approach it. As we turn a little bit then towards this legacy components, we've talked about stewardship, and we've talked about LiveGive and how the interface between executive coaching and the philanthropic. There's this concept of legacy leaving and development that people are working towards. So I want to come back to that a little bit in terms of how you think about legacy, how you're thinking about that for your own family, right, on this venture that you've started, but then also how you think about that with the dream makers that are there and how they take those dreams and then over time it converts to legacy.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about that word?
So I think it's very easy to see legacy as something that's lofty and that is far off. And I just keep trying to bring myself and to bring clients back to legacy is about now. It's about the decisions that you're making now. It's about creating a plan and working a plan. I mean, it's about defining what you want to do and then grinding it out one day at a time, keep improving it, keep making it happen, keep investing in it over time. And that's really where it just multiplies. And there's a piece where once you determine kind of what direction you want to go, it can take on a life of its own that goes beyond even just what you could imagine. You and I talked just a little bit about something that happened recently in Ukraine.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's the story that just popped into my mind again. So please share.
It was such just a tangible reminder to me of how legacy plays out. So I had been on staff at Willow Creek for 20 plus years. One of my favorite things I got to do during that time was building the care center that is there. And when I stepped away from my role, I felt like, okay, I'm walking away from all of this. I'm moving on to something new, and just felt released, felt like it was time to let go. Last summer, I got a call from the president of the Ukrainian Baptist Theological Seminary, and he had visited the care center when he was in town for the Global Leadership Summit. Okay. And he said, Heather, you obviously know what's going on in Ukraine right now. There are a lot of nonprofits who are coming in and providing immediate relief. We know the church needs to do that, but we also want the church to be thinking long-term about how to serve families with dignity, with sustainability. And the number one place I thought of was the care center. Would you help us understand how you got this started and the values and what the team did around it? And so after our conversation, one of the things I said to him was, don't reinvent the wheel. Find out what others are doing. So our next phone call, he calls me back and he says, you won't believe this. I was on the other side of Ukraine meeting with a pastor I had never met before, and we were having a conversation about what we would love to see the church in Ukraine do. And this other pastor on the other side of Ukraine says to me, there is a care center that I visited in Chicago in the U.S., and I just had tears in my eyes. The fact that God would use the vision of something like that to help the church in such a difficult time. Yeah. And we, over time, in working with their team, ended up developing a curriculum that was teaching each of their leaders of what they call their We Care centers. We've now trained up 4 cohorts of leaders, and they have 15-some We Care centers across Ukraine right now. And for me, the piece of that is we just do what God puts in front of us, and the reality is He's the one who multiplies it in His timing, in His ways, for that, I never could have orchestrated that. I wasn't trying to orchestrate that, but just the satisfaction of we do our part and God does the rest. And I just can't imagine anything I'd rather be part of than just concentrating on my piece of it and letting it go and watching God multiply it.
And so you said a few minutes ago, right, that legacy creation is about the now. What are you doing now? What are you doing on a daily basis? You can solve the world's problems. You think about the humanitarian tragedy that is the war that is going on over there and the people that are affected by Ukraine, in Ukraine. And then you step back and you look at the good and the care and the love that's going on. And these are the sort of things you can't explain, the deaths that have happened, the tragedy, the people that have lost family members. It's just, it's horrific on that side of things. And then that's also the opportunity to not just throw up your arms and say, the world's a mess, I'm walking away, but to say, how do I make a difference in the now? Yeah. And one day at a time, with the sphere of influence that you have, and doing the right thing to try to make that difference and see where it goes. And because if you plan to solve the world's problems, you're never going to get there, right? Yeah. It's too big. But if you can do that on a day-to-day basis and be intentional about what that is, which is what you did with the care center, and then how that has ripple effects to people now that can maybe find a little bit of refuge in a war-torn country, that's enormous. Yeah. And you almost stumbled upon it by that individual. This is where I think people think about legacy sometimes as the what am I known for? Mm-hmm. This has even been a shift in my thinking from some of our discussions. It isn't about the what you're known for. It is about the impact that you're leaving behind. It is how you're affecting the world around you and making it a better place, not just what you're tying your name to. There's a couple little exercises on that, and then I'll be curious to your additional thoughts. Is I step back at one point, it's like everyone has 8 biological great-grandparents, and how many of them can you name? And many people can't name very many of their great-grandparents. So within actually from great-grandparents, right, to grandparents, to parents, to you, you think about that, the name dissipates actually really, really quickly, right? Yeah. Your being known doesn't even happen within your own family, let alone the rest of the world. And that if you can make a difference and make a difference in the people's lives in Ukraine that you had a part to play in because of what was created, that's the legacy component, right? But you got to be doing the right thing now to build that legacy into the future.
Yes. One of the frameworks that I use with my clients and with CEOs is what I call the AIM framework. So if you think most CEOs, most high-capacity families, they have people asking them for money all the time. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a request. Everybody wants money or everybody wants time. And so try to figure out what is my legacy. And I had one client who was like, Heather, dumb it down for me. I need something simple to help keep in mind what I want to be focused on. And we came up with AIM. So AIM. Does it align? Does it align with my priorities and my values? Is it important enough to say no to other things? And is it mine to do? So does it align? Is it important enough to say no to other things? And is it mine? Is this something that I'm personally called to do? And if it is, do it. Put your hands to it. Get your hands in the dirt. Make it happen and build it. And that's what your legacy will grow from.
Right. Don't be 2 inches deep and a mile wide, right? Be 2 inches wide and a mile deep in terms of the focus area of whatever it is, which is true for entrepreneurs broadly in whatever their venture is. Yeah. Don't try to solve all the problems, but be the best in what it is that you're focused on. Mm-hmm. And then when you become the best at what you're focused on, you realize you can't possibly be the best at everything that's out there, right? It's actually, a different challenge, I think, for some people when they try to prove themselves. But that intellectual curiosity and the also engaging of people going, I can't possibly think about philanthropy, right? I need somebody alongside of me to do that, or my estate structure, or my tax. I need people to do that. Why? Because I'm the expert in what I do, and I know I need to go get experts alongside of me to do that too. This is mine. This is what I own. This is what's important to me. Have your daughters noticed a difference in you then over the last 5 years since you launched this? How has the relationship evolved and with Dan and just kind of from a family aspect?
Yeah, it has been such a gift, John, and a gift that I never would have asked for and never even really knew that I needed at the time. But to be able to build something that they can also speak into. And it was funny, my daughter, at one point I was doing a Zoom call because over COVID, I was building this business, from our home. And my daughter would hear something and then she would have feedback for Mom, what about this for that CEO? Or has this family thought about that? They would have real questions as they heard my side of the conversation on things. But really for my girls to be able to learn, you can put your heart and your passion to whatever you feel called to do and then go after it and build it. I love how empowered that they feel from having watched that and experienced that, and even just opportunities and relationships that I bring them into just because Dan and I have always done that. I also think, there was someone who said to me one point in time in some consulting that he was doing with our team, he said, you have to keep in mind that in any family, they can only handle so much ego. Like there's only so much bigness of personality. And he wasn't meaning it in a negative, like we think of egotistical as being negative, but he was meaning it so like bigness of job and responsibility. And I would say in my previous season, my job took up a lot of the air in the room for our family. And over the last 5 years, just the ebb and flow of Dan's job's more important in this season. We're all going to put our hands in the circle and help him in this way. And Deegan's going through her senior year. We're all going to cheer her on and help her in that way. And Avery and that as well too. But just the ebb and flow of a family, of how we're all in this together. And that has been really sweet about this season in building LiveGive.
It's when you look forward, call it the next 5 years, the next 10 years, right? What are your hopes organizationally? What are your hopes for the people that you're serving? Other individuals that might be listening saying, I probably need to reach out and have a conversation.
Yes.
What are your hopes as you think about what you're doing?
I want to keep serving on both of those sides, basically doing my best to add value and help create impact for families and for CEOs. And the part that I imagine scaling more over time is the philanthropy advising side. I have some really great experts that I bring in as consultants, and I know I'll continue scaling the business in that way to continue serving more and more families. And that becomes almost addictive in a beautiful way of you just see the life change, you see the transformation that can happen, you see the engagement of all the family members. And I definitely want to continue pouring energy into that side. I'll always keep doing the executive coaching as well too. I don't know that I will scale that as much over time. I think it will be more my personal relationship and connection with people and with CEOs and with boards. But the philanthropy side, I just feel like the sky's the limit on what could happen through that.
And you're keeping yourself fresh. Early on, we talked about filling the whiteboard and talking to a lot of people within the philanthropic world, talking to a lot of executive coaches, tapping into all those resources, leveraging on the formal. How do you keep yourself fresh now in terms of the learning and moving yourself forward? What are great resources that you've tapped into or are continuing to look into for yourself?
Yeah, it's really important for me to keep learning. And one of the ways that I do that is through just the network of people that I'm connected to. I'm now part of this one network, so it's all philanthropy advisors that are stewarding $5 million or more per year. So we all have similar challenges. We have different areas of expertise, different research things that we have done before and are able to help share with each other. So learning from others who are in the space is huge. In September, in a few weeks, I will head back to New York City for Global Goals Week with the United Nations and a whole bunch of gatherings that happen around that. A lot of my background is faith-based giving, and I really believe we can learn from anybody, and I want to be finding best practices that go across all different aspects of philanthropy and getting myself in those environments and showing up with my LiveGive name tag and just there to meet people and connect and to learn. So it's getting out of my comfort zone. It's getting myself in networks of people that are doing really great work and learning from them. And then it is constantly reading and constantly paying attention to where things are going well and new opportunities that are out there.
So I'm going to go hit several different pockets, maybe in a rapid fire fashion, of where you'd have words of encouragement for different groups of individuals. And so you can keep it short, but we'll hit several different groups here of like, what would your words of encouragement? What would your words of encouragement be to someone that's staring at the whiteboard right now and thinking about launching and taking a next step and reimagining their future?
It may look daunting, And it may be the most beautiful opportunity you will ever have in your life to start over and to take all your experiences, everything that you have done up to this point, and look at that whiteboard and say, so now what? And it is overwhelming of just how blank that it is. And just know it may lead to the sweetest season that you've ever had in your life.
Now look at the individual, right, in the shoes that you are in right now, that's 5 years into their new venture. What encouragement would you have for your peer group in that same category?
Keep going. It feels like I'm just getting started. I mean, I know 5 years it's a decent amount of time, and I feel like I am just on the cusp of how this is growing and developing, and I would say that to others as well. Keep going. Don't allow little setbacks to get in your way. Keep learning, keep pushing, keep going, and soak up all the knowledge that you can from other people around you, and just know it is just the beginning.
I'll come back to this next group in a second. So on a recent podcast, we discussed investing over the entrepreneurial life cycle. And it's like, don't wait for the liquidity event, right? How do you think about the totality of the balance sheet during the growth phase? And so I would look at giving, right, which brings me to the next group. Those that are in a major growth phase of their organizations, how does philanthropy fit into those individuals? Because they're still heads down, doing what they're doing in their business to grow it. But how should they be thinking about philanthropy and giving?
Especially on the corporate side, from an employee standpoint, your giving, so I'll talk about from a corporate side and then from a family side. So from a corporate side, your employees are watching how you steward the resources that you have. They're watching the values of your company. They're watching, are you living up to the brand of who you claim to be, and how you begin investing resources in a strategic way that engages employees, that's compelling to them. In one of the publicly traded companies that I work with, they originally were doing all of their giving in the U.S. They're a global company. We are now in their top 8 employment centers around the world with teams in all 8 of those countries, because that's more reflective of who they are and their values. So think of your giving from a corporate side, not just as what is good corporate responsibility, but even what that means to your employees and the satisfaction that will bring them coming to work. Don't wait until you have a huge dollar amount. Start now and get them engaged. So that would be on the corporate side. On the family side, one of the things that I do with clients is we always start by writing out their giving story. I want to know your giving story of where did this value come from in you? And I was with one couple that the husband basically said, my dad worked really hard his entire life, and he stored up his money because he couldn't wait to retire and to give it away. And he passed away before he ever got to give any of that money. And this husband and now wife together resolved, we will not live that way. And they have been so generous from the very early days of their business, because they weren't going to wait. They were going to start giving away the money now. And I would just say our lives are short. We don't know what tomorrow brings. We don't know if our legacy is being formed over the next 2 years or over the next 40 years. So what are you doing today to shape that and to begin forming what you want that legacy to be?
So I love both of these. When I was back with GE and I was out at Crotonville, which is the Executive Leadership Development Center, and in a session, the CEO was there moderating a session. And there's a saying, to be a great company, you have to be a good company. And so I asked the CEO at that point in time in terms of, what does that mean? And it's like, if you're not doing good, if you're not good in terms of the way you're engaging your employee base, the people, the communities you're operating in, and you're not giving back in some ways, it's really difficult to be a great company, right? So you don't do it for the sake of trying to be great and get your name out there. You do it because it's the right thing to be doing. And I think the values then get reflected, to your point, back into the employee base and the team, and they're working that much harder because they know that they're part of something that goes beyond what the day job is. There's something, which is virtuous into its own right. Don't get me wrong on that. and yet there's also other things that can be explored to reflect those values. Again, for us, it's supporting people that will never be our clients. How do we give back in that way? Then you move into another category, another bucket of individuals, and this is where we tell people you've got to focus on your estate strategy, your tax strategy during that growth phase, and the philanthropic strategy. If you're leading up to an event, and we even kind of put this combined, leading up to an event, because there's things you absolutely have to do before the event happens, or then after the event. You've now gone through, and we'll say business succession, not through family and intergenerational succession, but through a liquidity event. All of a sudden, you've moved from being an operating family into a financial family. And that also allows for this charitable piece to be a bigger focus because the operating company then has been sold. It's been liquidated. What's your encouragement and discussion with those families?
Once you actually have the money in your hand, in my opinion, it can be a lot harder to figure out how to dream with it. You get it, and then all of a sudden there's all the possibilities of what you would do. Whereas if you start out the very first bucket you pay attention to is, what do we want to do with this money? What is the legacy that we want to create out of the resources that we have been given? I work with clients all the time that I say the time to begin planning for what you will do with that catalytic event is now. Yeah. Don't wait until you have the money in hand. Dream now about what you would do with that money. And then if that doesn't end up coming through, you still have a dream that you can hold on to figure out down the road how you would steward that. But to think and plan ahead of time of what will those resources do to you? Right. And how do you want to use those to impact others? Right. And being thoughtful and strategic about that on the front end, right, so that then when it does come, you have the satisfaction of knowing exactly, and now we are going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to invest here. Right. And the joy that you can experience from getting that check is really different when you already know some of the impact that is going to come out of it.
Right. And if you know that in advance, you can actually be more strategic regarding how the gift is handled before the event itself. Yeah, definitely. And the other thought is like, why would you wait? You know your values, right? Yeah. I mean, if people have their belief system, and I'm not saying that belief systems and values can't evolve over time and change, but hopefully, right, anyone is out there right now could sit down and say, here's my belief system, here's my values, here's what's important to me. If I go through your AIM model, right, here's the important part for me that I'm giving to today, and that not waiting, right? And only working the muscles, developing the muscles, so that when you get to that point, it's larger and larger. And frankly, that's also with the next gen, because if you wait till you pass to engage the next gen, well, they're gonna wake up one day and all of a sudden have to deal with all of it. You probably want to be training them up and engaging them as we go. I knew we'd be long on time and could keep going with this conversation, Heather. But I actually want to turn to you in closing thoughts for our listeners.
I just want to say all of us have a limited number of days. We have a limited number of resources. And one of the great opportunities is how we maximize what we have been given from a time and talent standpoint, and obviously from a resources, a treasures standpoint. And for us to pay attention to that and to be as thoughtful and strategic about how we give as we are about other areas of our lives, we get to be part of something that is only ours to do. Yeah. There are opportunities out there that nobody else necessarily will say yes to because it is designed. It's something unique to you, something that can be created specifically out of the passion and the gifts that you have. And so pay attention to what it is that your family is called to do, the legacy that you want to lead together, and how that is going to have an impact, not only in whatever you invest in, but how it's going to have an impact on your family and the generations to come.
Right. And it all starts with the whiteboard, right? And maybe that'll be the title of this segment. It all starts with the whiteboard. Thank you, Heather, for being here, joining me today, this conversation. I look forward to our continued building upon this conversation in our boardroom and also with the individuals we serve together. Thank you to the listeners for just listening in, being part of this conversation. The encouragement back to you to take out your own whiteboard and think about what it means both for your business, for your family, and also for those organizations that are important to you as you engage in your strategic philanthropy as well. You can find LiveGive online. Google's very good for this, as well as if you want to continue the conversation, please email us at clearconversations@ccpwealth.com. Thank you and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.